from Lagos, the nation's commercial capital. This is the News at 10. Live from Channels Television. Reporting tonight, Ijoma Onyato.
Hello and welcome. Independent National Electoral Commission distributes sensitive materials to all local government areas ahead of Saturday's governorship election in Edo State, as President Buhari warns against do-or-die politics. Singapore Court of Appeal frees Nigerian man sentenced to death for drug trafficking, almost 10 years in incarceration. Unilag visitation panel submits reports of controversial removal of the university's vice-chancellor as Dr. Wale Babalakin resigns as the institution's pro-chancellor. And World Health Organization warns of very serious COVID-19 situation unfolding in Europe. Plus, we'll have business, sports, and later on news from our studios in London.
On business news tonight, federal government directs individuals holding accounts across financial institutions and insurance firms in the country to undergo self-certification process.
On sports news tonight, former Barcelona coach Quique Setién confirms he will take legal action against the Catalan club for breaching their employment contract.
Today, the Independent National Electoral Commission affirmed that it's indeed ready for the governorship election in Edo State as it began the transfer of sensitive materials to all the 18 local government areas of the state. The materials, which were delivered to the Central Bank office in Benin City, the Edo State capital, during the week, were moved from the complex in pickup trucks, escorted by security personnel to their designated local government areas. Our correspondent Jessica Ologbosere reports.
There is a heavy presence of security personnel right outside the Central Bank of Nigeria complex on Apapava Road in Benin City, the Edo State capital, who have taken position awaiting the next directive as officials of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, political party agents, and other stakeholders turn up and proceed into the premises for the day's assignment, the distribution of sensitive materials for the Edo governorship election. Hours later, the time comes for the materials to be stacked onto the pickup trucks meant to take them to the 18 local government areas.
On arrival, they will sort out the materials word by word. And tomorrow being Friday, they are moving to the racks. The racks are the registration, we call them registration centers, area centers. That is where they will pass the night. Friday night, they will be at the rack centers. And we have made adequate security provisions at the rack centers for them to stay, arrange themselves, sort out their materials unit by unit, and then pass the night. Early in the morning on Saturday, they move from the racks to the polling units, which are not far distances from the rack centers. So they move from the racks to the polling units, and then voting will commence by 8:30 in the morning.
Soon, the trucks begin to leave the CBN premises. A local observer group, which arrived shortly before this time, looks on. The party agents for the All Progressives Congress and the Zenith Labour Party shared their observations, while that of the People's Democratic Party declines comment.
I give President Mahmoud Yakubu and his team a thumbs up. And I'm only hoping that this will translate to the various LGAs and various rack centers, and at the end of the day to the units.
They've been doing their bit, although it's been hectic and slow. But it's been going on smooth, and we are quite satisfied with all they've done and so on.
One of the supervising resident electoral commissioners has stayed back to see the process to its end.
All the materials are carried by our vehicles, and the vehicles are tracked. So we are tracking their movements. In the office, they are watching the movement. So any of them that stops unnecessarily will be aware of that.
with the sensitive materials deployed to the local government areas, INEC believes it has made more progress in its preparations for the Edo governorship election on Saturday and is confident the remaining steps would also go smoothly. Jessica Olubuse, Channels Television News.
And President Muhammadu Buhari is asking political parties, candidates and security agents to behave responsibly in the forthcoming governorship election in Edo State. The president, in a message to voters, political parties, election officials and security personnel, also warned against what he described as the do-or-die mentality to politics. He says, "I am passionately committed to free and fair elections, but my own commitment is not enough if other actors at ground zero refuse to abide by the rules. I want to see democratic standards in the country raised higher at every level, but these cannot be achieved when politicians resort to do-or-die methods to gain power by any means or machination." He adds that the do-or-die mentality to politics is a threat to free and fair elections because the actors are more focused on winning than caring about a fair outcome that reflects the will of the people. The president also appealed to all political parties and their candidates to respect law and order while asking electoral officials and security agents to remain neutral to ensure free and fair elections. Meanwhile, security is also a major concern during the Edo election, and Inspector General of Police Mohammed Adamu has ordered the restriction of vehicular movement in the state effective 11:59 p.m. on Friday, September the 18th, to 6 p.m. on Saturday, September the 19th. The IGP notes that the restriction order is informed by the need to prevent the free flow, circulation and use of illicit arms, as well as the movement of political thugs, touts and other criminals who may want to hijack and disrupt the electoral process. He asked residents to go out and vote on election day with a promise that the police and other security agencies have been sufficiently mobilized to provide a safe, secure and conducive environment for the process. But it's not just the police that's concerned about the security situation during the election. The Center for Democracy and Development has identified 14 local government areas in the state considered as hotspots for electoral violence. The group is insisting that the directive by politicians to their supporters to deliver 100% on election day is a recipe for violence. CDD Director Idayat Hassan is asking security agencies to beam the spotlight on the identified hotspots while urging INEC to consider extending the voting time given the delay that may be experienced because of the extra health precautions owing to COVID-19.
We identified that the likelihood of violence, particularly with the two trends that has been earlier mentioned on the need to deliver your polling unit 100% directive given by the political actors, the parties' claim and counterclaim of victory, that violence is likely to be across the three senatorial districts. Areas we identified include Esako West, Esako East, Esako Central, Oredo, Orionwa, amongst several others, which are all contained in this report. Again, to talk more about the issue of fake news, I think this is a very prevalent, and it will likely also spike violence and induce voter apathy. I think one other issue that we really want to put on the table is that aside the management of logistics, which of course the COVID-19 pandemic and the issue of insecurity puts on the table of INEC, it has further extended it, it's enlarging it, and it's not like we've perfected it in previous years. INEC should be ready to extend voting hours, in particular if they have to implement their COVID-19 policy, and because it takes longer period of time to conduct the elections compared to what it used to be.
In the meantime, the People's Democratic Party's governorship candidate and incumbent governor Godwin Obaseki says he's repositioned governance with people-oriented projects in the last 4 years, including a 30-year master plan for the development of the state. He also stated that Saturday's governorship election will be violence-free, following arrangements made by INEC and security agencies, and he asked the electorate to come out and vote for the ruling People's Democratic Party. Governor Obaseki was speaking during a state broadcast ahead of the September the 19th governorship election in Edo State.
Since November 2016, we have made giant strides in rewriting the development narrative of our dear state. We have revamped our primary healthcare system through deep-rooted reforms. We have transformed our basic education to be more responsive to the needs of the 21st century by training our teachers and introducing technology to our schools. We have rebuilt critical physical and digital infrastructure across the state. We have strengthened our security architecture and enacted civil service and pension reforms for better productivity and sustainability, and have created thousands of opportunities for young people to be employed and empowered. Some of our other reforms have included energy projects such as the 55 megawatts Osiomo Independent Power Plant, IPP, which is already completed and ready for commissioning, and the 6,000 barrels per day Edo Modular Refinery. We have also made investments in real estate such as Emota Gardens, which first phase has been completed. We will reposition government as an enabler to consolidate and enhance our signature projects, such as Edo Jobs, creative and innovative hubs, and industrialization projects. The future will be driven by technology and data, and Edo State will be repositioned to participate in the fourth industrial revolution. I implore all of you to come out and re-elect me and my deputy, Philip Shoaibu, by voting massively for our party, the People's Democratic Party, on September 19th. We are trusting God Almighty that the election will be violence-free because of the preparations which has been made by security agencies and the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC.
And on the part of the All Progressives Congress, the party is insisting that it remains committed to honouring the peace accord recently signed by its candidates for the governorship election, and that's irrespective of the outcome of the polls on Saturday. The Director General of the Edo State APC Governorship Campaign Council, General Cecil Esekaigbe, explains that the party has unwavering confidence of winning the election, while also looking forward to a peaceful and credible exercise. He was speaking at the party's campaign office in Benin City, the state capital.
Our party is a party of peace. And a few days ago, our candidate, led by the chairman of the party, went to sign a peace accord organized by the National Peace Committee. And that is the highest level of commitment to peace. So we are ready to continue to maintain peace, irrespective of the outcome, although we are very convinced of total victory. And we also want to make it very clear that those who believe in thuggery must know there is consequence for every action. The security agencies have expressed themselves very clearly that they will not tolerate any form of malfeasance or the other. And we key into that promise and look forward to a very, very peaceful, credible, and fair election in Edo State.
And staying with the elections, the national leadership of the People's Democratic Party is demanding a free and fair conduct from the electoral umpire on Saturday in Edo and on October the 10th in Ondo State. The demand, according to the party, is the view of their recent experiences in off-season elections conducted in the past year.
We are deeply worried and in pain because of our past experiences, especially that of Kogi and Bayelsa. We have come here today for a peaceful, as you can see, we didn't come with numbers. I mean, needless. It's a peaceful protest. And to remind INEC and to demand INEC to make sure that they will also speak to other security agencies not to damage the image of INEC. But strictly, they should follow the rules. That's why we are here today. We believe that our message will be delivered to the chairman, and we have confidence that INEC will not fail again.
In part two, after the break, Unilag visitation panel submits report of controversial removal of the university's vice-chancellor as Dr. Wale Babalakin resigns as the institution's pro-chancellor. That's in a moment. Do join us again. Welcome back. If you've just joined us, you're watching the news at 10 on Channels Television, coming to you live from Lagos. A reminder of our top stories. Independent National Electoral Commission distributes sensitive materials to all local government areas ahead of Saturday's governorship election in Edo State, just as the president warns against do-or-die politics. Singapore Court of Appeal frees Nigerian man sentenced to death for drug trafficking after almost 10 years in incarceration. Unilag visitation panel submits report of controversial removal of the university's vice-chancellor as Dr. Wale Babalakin resigns as the institution's pro-chancellor. And World Health Organization warns of very serious COVID-19 situation unfolding in Europe. The president has appended his signature to the Nigeria Police Bill 2020, repealing the Police Act of 2004. The presidency said in a statement that the new bill will provide for a more effective and well-organized police force, driven essentially by the principles of transparency and accountability in its operations and the management of its resources. The President's Special Advisor on Media and Publicity, Mr. Femi Adesina, explains that the Act establishes an appropriate funding framework for the police in line with what's obtainable in other federal government key institutions. According to him, the new Act will also enhance professionalism in the force through increased training opportunities and create an enduring cooperation between the police and the communities in the maintenance of peace as well as combating crime. To legal matters, where the Court of Appeal in Singapore has acquitted and discharged a Nigerian man, Ilechukwu Chukwudi, who has been on death row for drug trafficking for almost 10 years. The country's apex court, in a rare decision, reversed itself and found Ilechukwu not guilty 5 years after the same court convicted him of the offence. He faced a charge of trafficking almost 2 kilograms of a banned substance found in a black trolley bag he brought with him from Nigeria into Singapore on November the 13th, 2011. He claimed to have collected the luggage at the airport in Nigeria, found only clothes in it, and passed several immigration checks in both countries without problems. He handed the bag to the Singaporean stall assistant named Hadima Awang, whose car was then searched by the police and the drugs discovered in the luggage. Ilechukwu was initially acquitted after a trial in a high court in 2014, but the appellate court reversed that decision in 2015 and found him guilty of drug trafficking. His lawyers then argued for the decision to be reviewed, which the Court of Appeal obliged. His acquittal makes it the second time in the last 2 years that a Nigerian citizen has defeated a capital drugs-related offence in Singapore. The special visitation panel set up by the federal government to investigate the management crisis rocking the University of Lagos has submitted the report of its findings. The Minister of Education, Adamu, who received the report on behalf of the federal government, says the recommendations of the panel will be thoroughly scrutinized with the aim of full implementation. The panel was set up to investigate the crisis rocking the university following the earlier removal of its Vice-Chancellor, Professor Oluwatoyin Ogundipe, by its governing council, led by Dr. Wale Babalakin.
The crisis rocking the University of Lagos may soon be resolved following a report submitted by the 7-man visitation panel constituted by the federal government. Before presenting the report to the minister, Chairman of the panel, Professor Tukuro Saad, expresses optimism that the report of the panel will bring an end to the crisis that has festered in the university over the last 1 year.
We cannot divulge any content of the report. We have completed this work, and we hope this special presidential visitation panel would have made some contribution towards resolving the problem in the University of Lagos and towards preventing similar problems in other universities all over the country.
Without mincing words, the minister assures members of the panel that the report will be implemented.
The visitor of the university, after due consideration of the report, will take a decision on the matter as appropriate in order to restore peace and conducive learning atmosphere in the University of Lagos and the university system as a whole.
Away from the Unilag crisis, the Administrative Audit Panel of the African University of Science and Technology presents its report with a call on the government to examine the evidence attached.
The report is in two parts. The main report is contained in Volume 1, which is this. Volume 1 consists of 116 pages, covering the 70 hours. The second part is in our Volume 2, which contains the evidences that support the information we have in Volume 1, and we have called it Volume 2.
Again, the minister reassures members of the panel of the government's determination to reposition the African University of Science and Technology.
Let me assure you that the Minister of Education will not relent in ensuring that the university is positioned to fulfill the vision for which it was established.
With the submission of the reports, the glory of the University of Lagos and the African University of Science and Technology appears set for restoration.
Meanwhile, the Pro-chancellor of the University of Lagos, Dr. Wale Babalake, has resigned from his position at the institution. Dr. Babalake announced his resignation in a letter addressed to the Minister of Education, accusing the visitation panel set up by the federal government of bias, adding that the actions of members showed that they were interested in exonerating the sacked Vice-Chancellor, Professor Ogundikwe. He claimed that some of the vice-chancellors who made up the panel were from relatively smaller universities who may not understand the workings of Unilag as a federal institution and as such would not be in the best position to determine a fair hearing. The statement reads in part, "I find it difficult to understand how a non-executive chairman of a governing council could be requested to recuse himself during the visitation. The Vice-Chancellor could only recuse himself if he was still in office. Implicit in this position is that the Vice-Chancellor was acknowledged as still being in office despite his removal." Before he was asked to step aside, the institution's governing council, under the leadership of Dr. Babalake, had on August the 12th removed Professor Oluwatoyin Ogundikwe as Vice-Chancellor of Unilag over allegations of financial misappropriation and abuse of office. Let's turn our attention now to the ongoing coverage of the COVID-19 pandemic. And the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 is again expressing serious concern about people who turn up very late for treatment after testing positive for the virus, attributing that the surge of that causes fatalities. The Minister of Health, Dr. Osage Ehanire, explains that the delay in seeking medical attention is a major challenge that must be dealt with. This was part of discussions at the bi-weekly briefing of the task force in Abuja today.
It's exactly 6 months since President Buhari inaugurated the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19. During this period of coordinating the national response to the pandemic, Nigeria has tested over 482,000 samples, treated and discharged over 47,000 patients from the over 56,000 confirmed cases recorded. Unfortunately, the country has also lost 1,090 persons to the virus, a situation the task force says delay in reporting for treatment has complicated.
Our objective is still to lower the case fatality rate to less than 1%. But an additional challenge we have observed is that most fatalities are among those persons reporting late for treatment when their clinical condition has deteriorated seriously. The delay in deciding when or whether to go for treatment is what we must fight against.
The task force also speaks on development at the airport since the reopening of the airspace for international flights, as well as the ongoing strike by health workers.
Let me once again send a strong appeal to all health workers, particularly JHS members, that the nation can ill afford any further disruption to its health systems. The ongoing strike has been very costly in terms of human lives, but such losses can be avoided.
There have been instances where passengers have left with COVID-19 PCR results that were negative, and on arrival, at the time when we used to test within a day or two of arrival, having positive results. Passengers that came into the country, and we had more than 14,000 evacuated, on average, about 5% of them tested positive for COVID-19, even though they had a negative PCR on boarding. We have identified 13 countries that had significant discrepant COVID-19 test results. We have met with their ambassadors, and we have also obtained additional information on the sort of testing that they do, and also assurance from these countries, together with a list of accredited laboratories that we can use.
Although most countries, including Nigeria, are beginning to improve in the management of the pandemic, leading to the reopening of the nation's economy, the task force calls for caution and the need to take personal responsibility seriously.
Meanwhile, the Director General of the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, Dr. Chikwe Ihekwazo, believes that this is not the right time for health workers to go on strike. He made the comments during the virtual National Economic Council meeting chaired by the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo. The meeting had in attendance governors from across the country and a cross-section of ministers. Our State House correspondent, Kayla Megwa, reports.
The National Economic Council, chaired by Vice President Yemi Osinbajo, meets monthly and advises the President on specific economic programs for the country. Holding virtually this month in line with the realities of COVID-19, this meeting looked at several issues. For instance, the National Association of Resident Doctors and the Joint Health Workers Union made good on their promise to embark on strike actions till their demands are met. The NCDC boss says the strike is ill-timed.
Yes, there are challenges for every Nigerian, but please, in the middle of a war is not really the time to go on strikes. Let us pull together and get over this situation, and then we can start thinking about some of the hard decisions that we need to make.
The state of the educational sector was also discussed, and the COVID-19 response plan.
The states that have qualified are Abia, Anambra, Akwa Ibom, Benue, Ebonyi, Jigawa, Kaduna, Katsina, Kebbi, Kano, Nasarawa, Niger, Plateau, Sokoto, and Zamfara states. These are the states that met 2 of the 3 criteria for GPE funding. This is grant from the World Bank and other donors.
On flooding in most parts of the country, the Minister of Environment is proposing tree planting as a possible solution.
This coming Saturday, I will be flagging off a training session for youth and women in Kano under GGW. GGW is the Great Green Wall, and that has the sole responsibility of planting trees all across the 11 states across the country for desertification control, but at the same time also can help in flooding in areas where you may have flash flood or something like that.
Balances of the country's accounts were also presented at the meeting. The ex-accrued account balance is now $72,408,743.16. The stabilization account balance, $43,603,048,431.80, while the National Resource Development Fund stands at 144 billion naira. From the State House in Abuja, Kayla Megwa, Channels Television News.
When the News at 10 returns, federal government directs individuals holding accounts across financial institutions and insurance firms to undergo self-certification process. That's on business. Please stay with us. Welcome back to the News at 10. The Minister of Labour and Employment, Dr. Chris Ngige, is insisting that the government is not turning deaf ears to the yearnings of health workers, but is worried that despite the funds paid to them, the doctors are still embarking on a strike in a pandemic. Dr. Ngige says the initial budget for the protesting health workers was exhausted after they complained that some of their colleagues were shortchanged.
Government budgeted 20 billion. And the 20 billion was for the 3 months of March, April, May, and June. But in between and on the way, when the payment started, government noticed that you have to capture some people that were not even put into account in the original net. So the whole 20 billion was swallowed in 2 months' pay. And government needed now to start searching for money, extra money. President graciously gave an extra 9 billion, 8 billion, sorry, 9 billion. And we had a remnant of about eaten out of the original 20 billion. So that was it. Joesu made the case to the employers, Federal Ministry of Health, that some of their members were not captured, and that some of them were underpaid. They made a case for people in the registry. And we looked at it.
From health to infrastructure now, commercial operations may not begin soon on the Lagos-Ibadan railway corridor, as earlier promised by the Ministry of Transportation. And that's because the Nigerian Railway Corporation says the ministry does not have the go-ahead from the contractors for the service to run hitch-free. The Minister of Transportation, however, gives the assurance that the project is on course to be delivered on the set date, despite expressing his reservations on the pace so far. Our correspondent Dare Idu reports.
This is the starting point for the 156 kilometers Lagos-Ibadan standard gauge project inspection. With construction workers on site, the project appears to be taking shape, at least at this point. The Minister of Transportation, Rotimi Amechi, and top management staff of the Nigerian Railway Corporation moved from station to station, getting updates on the level and quality of work done so far. Trading along rail tracks still seems to be a challenge, as observed at Agege and Oshodi stations, where traders are seen in clusters at an unsafe distance.
Enforcement of the law is essential. Secondly, that the governor has promised that they will certainly clear them from the track. Punish those who refuse to obey. That the governor of Lagos has promised. Because you see, if we don't take them out of the track, we'll continue to have cases like we had the last time, and we don't want more deaths.
Along the line, there are major and minor terminals still under construction, and according to the minister, the deadlines vary.
They expect that by end of September, they should finish the 3 stations they've told us. By the end of October, they should finish the remaining 3 minor stations they told us. By the end of December, they said they will finish 3 major stations, excluding Apapa. But we are insisting that a special task force be set up at Apapa to complete it at the same time as the rest.
It is a race against time for the ministry and its contractors who are working to make up for the time already lost to COVID-19. The Lagos-Ibadan rail construction is one of the most talked about projects under this administration, and that is because of the questions around funding, the impact it would have on the people who live around this corridor, and questions around the timelines. Now the Minister of Transportation is hoping that with this monthly inspection, it can put the contractors on their toes for them to deliver this project at the set date. For those expecting skeletal operations on this corridor, earlier promised to kick off mid-September with 16 trips daily, they may have to wait a little longer.
And as far as they are still working here, we have to collaborate with them to ensure that proper caution. So we are meeting with them, but we have not fixed a date. We fixed a date before hoping, but they came up with some challenges, which will make it, because this time it's going to be commercial, not free.
Bridges, vehicular overpasses and underpasses are part of the rail project. The government expects to produce wide-ranging economic benefits to the country, despite criticism over the source of funding by some Nigerians. Dari Ido, Channels Television News.
To security matters now, the Nigerian Air Force says it's decimated 7 armed bandits camps and neutralized close to 100 armed bandits in airstrikes executed under Operation Wutandaji 2 from Saturday, September the 12th to Wednesday, September the 16th. The Air Force said in a statement that the subsidiary operation was aimed at taking out some identified locations in Zamfara State, including their forest hideouts, flying over 100 operational hours. The statement adds that the Chief of Air Staff, Air Marshal Sadiq Abubakar, has asked the team to sustain the intensity of operations in order to deny the armed bandits safe havens, as well as curtail their ability to attack innocent civilians. Let's take a look at some business news now, and here's Anne Waudu.
Banking, so easy, so simple. Dial *894# now to experience it. You first, First Bank.
Thank you, Ijoma. Hello and welcome to Business News. The federal government has directed all persons holding accounts across financial institutions in Nigeria and insurance firms to complete and submit self-certification forms. In an announcement made via its Twitter handle, the federal government says individuals who hold accounts in different financial institutions will have to collect and submit separate forms to each one of the institutions in line with the Income Tax Regulation 2019. However, it is still not clear how the self-certification process differs from the bank verification number and the national identification number required by the central bank for bank account holders. Meanwhile, the federal government has warned that failure to comply may include monetary penalty or inability of individuals to operate their accounts. The Federation Accounts Allocation Committee has shared a total of 682.06 billion naira to the federal, state and local government councils and agencies as revenue for the month of August. And this was made known after the monthly meeting of the FAC for September, which was held today through virtual conferencing. A breakdown of the total amount shows that the federal government received 272.9 billion naira, 197.6 billion naira was distributed to state governments, while local government councils got 147.4 billion naira, while 30.8 billion naira was allocated to oil-producing states as 13% revenue. Meanwhile, FAC already explains that while oil and gas royalty, companies' income tax, import and excise duty, and value-added tax increased considerably, petroleum profit tax decreased significantly, while excess crude account balance currently stands at $72.4 million. And let's head to the stock market, where it has remained in negative territory for a third consecutive day this week. That's after slightly mixed sectoral performance. Let's get the details from Chimezie Obiwagu.
Thanks, and welcome to the Stock Market Report. In spite of the gentle and fearful nature of the bear, it has refused to allow the raging bull intimidate it away from the market. The bull struggled to make it back, but that did not happen. And so we saw another marginal loss of 0.07% on the overall index. It has become apparent that the negative trend is likely to continue as there are no positive news yet to spur investors. Again, we are gradually coming to the end of the markdown of stocks due to interim dividend payment. Today, Zenith Bank was marked down, and tomorrow it will be Access Bank. Interestingly, the prices of those two stocks closed unchanged today. Again, the banks defined the tone of the market with a drop of 0.36% on the sectoral index chart. The activity chart explains the lackluster performance of the market as we are seeing a gradual reduction in volume and value traded. Now, some traders actually believe that the market may gradually return to an era when it does less than 2 billion naira daily average value. We have one more day to the end of the trading week. Don't forget, investors are also waiting and watching to see what the central bank's MPC will do next week, particularly with a spike on inflation rate. That, again, is not helping matters. But miracle, they say, happen always. I can only advise we keep the optimism high. And that was the stock market report. I'm Chimezie Obi Iwago.
Thank you, Chimezie. Well, it's a similar negative picture for major stock markets around the world. They all ended today's trading session in the red. Investors are still reacting to more losses from tech shares and announcements from the central banks. Let's see the closing figures for today. With those red numbers, we'll end Business News tonight. Thank you for watching. I'm Anne Mwawadu. The rest of News at 10 continues with Ijoma.
Banking so easy, so simple. Dial star 894 hash now to experience it. You first, First Bank.
Thanks a lot, Anne. Still ahead on the news at 10, World Health Organization warns of very serious COVID-19 situation unfolding in Europe. Plus more stories from our London studio in Around the World in 5. Do stay with us. Welcome back. The president has pledged Nigeria's support for the consolidation of democracy in West African countries within the limits of its resources. President Muhammadu Buhari was speaking today at the State House Abuja while hosting the president of Burkina Faso, who is on a one-day official visit to Nigeria. According to President Buhari, we are keeping tabs on situations in countries that have elections ahead. We know the countries that are calm and the ones where there have been unfortunate casualties. We will always support those who have elections ahead so that things can go on smoothly. His counterpart, who chairs the Economic Trade and Liberalization Scheme of ECOWAS, says he's in Nigeria to discuss crucial sub-regional issues with President Buhari. The World Health Organization says the 14-day quarantine period for anyone exposed to the coronavirus should remain in place and should not be changed. This comes as the Global Health Agency warns of a very serious situation emerging in Europe. The recommendation is based on a scientific understanding of the virus's incubation period and its transmission. Here's Simon Pusey with more international news in Around the World in 5.
Good evening and welcome to the Channel Studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. Traces of the nerve agent allegedly used to poison Russian politician Alexei Navalny were found on a bottle in the hotel room where he stayed before falling ill. That's according to his team. Mr. Navalny collapsed on a flight in Siberia in August. Several European laboratories have confirmed he was poisoned with a Novichok nerve agent. It was previously thought that he may have been targeted at the airport, but now his team wrote on Instagram that it was done before he left his room to reach the airport. Mr. Navalny is currently receiving treatment in Germany. Police on the Greek island of Lesbos are moving thousands of migrants and refugees from the fire-gutted Moira camp to a new tent city nearby. 70 female officers in protective suits were flown in to organise the transfer of women and children to the temporary Kara Tepe camp. On Wednesday, 4 Afghan asylum seekers were charged with starting the fire that destroyed Moira last week. Meanwhile, in Italy, over 70 migrants have jumped in desperation from the open arms rescue ship near the coast after being on board for more than 1 week with another 200 people. The open arms ship has not yet been allowed to dock in a port by the Italian government. Ivory Coast's former Prime Minister and disqualified opposition candidate Guillaume Soro has called on the opposition to boycott the upcoming presidential elections in October. Mr. Soro, who is in exile in France and was convicted this year in absentia for embezzlement, said the poll represented a civilian coup d'etat because the constitution states that leaders cannot rule for more than 2 terms. However, the incumbent, Alassane Ouattara, in power since 2010, says the change in the constitution in 2016 reset his term and allowed him to run again. According to a new report from the United Nations, rape, murder and other abuses are still common in Burundi despite a change of government. The UN report said there had been numerous rights abuses in Burundi connected to elections held in May. The new president, retired General Evariste Shemaya, took power in June. Clashes between protesters and police have broken out in the Ecuadorian capital Quito, demanding unpaid wages for healthcare workers. Water cannon and police in riot gear cleared protesters from streets and squares as the protests heated up. The protests followed a decision by hundreds of postgraduate medical students working in public hospitals to walk off the job to demonstrate against a delay in wage payments. Ecuador is facing liquidity problems due to the low price of crude oil and the effects of the pandemic, but the government has said it hopes to get back on track with payments after the disbursement of an International Monetary Fund credit in the coming weeks. In Brazil, fires continue to rage in the world's largest wetland, Pantanal, where almost 25,000 square kilometres have gone up in smoke. Firefighters are working to douse the blazes raging throughout the dry underbush and riverbanks of what is considered a unique ecosystem. According to biologists, the fires are now threatening one of the most biodiverse ecosystems on the planet, home to roughly 1,200 vertebrate animal species, including 36 that are threatened with extinction. And finally, Turkey's first flying car has successfully completed its first test flight. A video released by Turkish company Baykar Defense showed Cezeri, the name of the model, flying up to 10 meters before landing safely on the tarmac. Named after a 12th century Muslim polymath known for the invention of the flushing toilet, Cezeri is expected to reach 2,000 meters high with a speed of 100 kilometers per hour. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the Channel studios in Lagos.
Technology. Thanks a lot, Simon. On to sports now. Here's Olumide Mokoli.
Thank you, IJ. Hello and welcome to Sports News. The Minister of Youth and Sports Development, Sunday Dare, has reiterated that clubs must comply with all licensing regulations for the upcoming league season. The minister warned that clubs who fail to adhere to the regulations will be barred from participating in the league. The league management company has already invited the clubs to submit their licensing applications.
Every club that will play in our professional league must meet necessary conditions. And if they don't meet it, they will not play. We're ready to go with even 7 or 8 clubs And then as you meet these conditions, you join. Because what it does is that it puts value on our players. It attracts private investment. It brings sponsors in. The benefits are massive. So this time, we're committed to making sure that this regime works for all of us.
And Quique Setien has confirmed he will be taking legal action against Barcelona after being legally informed about his sacking on Wednesday. The Catalan club only formalized the exit of Setien over the 5 weeks after he was relieved of his first-team coaching duties. The 61-year-old published a statement on behalf of his entire coaching staff. Reports say his lawyers will demand $4.7 million from the club in compensation for failing to fulfill the employment contract signed on January the 14th and runs till 2022. Juventus have terminated their contract with Gonzalo Higuain by mutual consent, which has a negative effect worth $21.6 million on their finances. The Italian Serie A champions paid the $106 million release clause to get the Argentine forward from Napoli in the summer of 2016. He had unsuccessful loans at AC Milan and Chelsea in 2018-2019 season and has been told by new Juventus coach Andrea Pirlo that he was not part of their plans for this season. Higuain is already in the United States of America, where he is expected to sign for a new Major League Soccer franchise, Inter Miami. Staying with football, Munich city authorities have ordered Bayern Munich to kick off the new Bundesliga season behind closed doors because of a rising COVID-19 infection rate in the Bavarian capital. The decision puts an end to the European champions' plans to allow 7,500 fans into the Allianz Arena to watch Friday's opening game at home to Schalke 04. And that's it on Sports News. Ijoma, back to you.
Many thanks, Olumide. And the main news again. The Independent National Electoral Commission today distributed sensitive materials to all local government areas in Edo State ahead of Saturday's governorship election. President Muhammadu Buhari also warned against a do-or-die mentality, while the police has restricted vehicular movement in the state. Also today, the Court of Appeal in Singapore freed a Nigerian man sentenced to death for drug trafficking after almost 10 years of being in incarceration. And the World Health Organization today warned that a very serious COVID-19 situation is unfolding in Europe. That's the news at 10 tonight. Thank you so much for staying with us. I'm Ijoma Bunyato. Do have a good night and stay safe as well.